Before Christopher Moltisanti ever pulled a trigger, he inherited a story. His father wasn't present. He was legendary. A myth whispered in Newark basements and social clubs. That myth mattered more than guidance. He didn't grow up wanting a career. He grew up wanting validation. In neighborhoods like his, power wasn't optional, it was survival. And legacy is a dangerous thing to give a boy without discipline. If breakdowns like this make sense to you, the rank, the psychology, the structure behind the story, take a second to like the video and subscribe. And drop a comment with the next character you want dissected. The deeper the arc, the better the lesson. In The Many Saints of Newark, his father's shadow forms the blueprint. Christopher doesn't remember the man clearly. He remembers how others spoke about him. Respected, feared, important. That's the foundation. Not love, not mentorship, reputation. When a child grows up hearing that he's connected to something powerful, he doesn't ask whether it's good. He asks when it will be his turn. That's how the hook gets set early. By the time we meet him in The Sopranos, Christopher isn't powerful. He's positioned. He's related to Tony. That proximity matters. In organized crime, blood and mentorship create shortcuts others don't get. But shortcuts come with scrutiny. He's an associate. No official protection, no formal rank. It's just expectation. His job is simple: earn, obey, and prove he belongs in rooms he hasn't earned yet. As an associate, Christopher's role is tactical: collections, errands, violence when required. This stage isn't about authority, it's about usefulness. He wants respect immediately, but the structure demands patience, and patience is not his strength. He reacts emotionally, he overtalks, he tries to look bigger than he is. In that life, men who rush visibility either rise carefully or get cut down early. His first real murders aren't about ambition, they're about proving loyalty. Blood is currency in that world. Once he crosses that line, there's no civilian exit. Violence elevates him from errand boy to trusted asset. But here's the flaw: he kills with emotion, not calculation. A disciplined soldier executes and moves on. Christopher carries ego into every act. That difference matters more than he realizes. Eventually, he's made. The ceremony is symbolic: oath, blood, protection. Once inducted, he can't be touched without permission. That's a structural upgrade. But rank doesn't change personality. A made man must be steady, predictable, politically aware. Christopher thinks the button means arrival. In reality, it means pressure increases, expectations grow, mistakes become expensive, and now everyone is watching him closer. As a newly made man, Christopher starts to believe he's on a leadership track. Tony fuels that belief at times, calling him the future, but grooming is not promotion, it's testing. He's given responsibility, small rackets, moments of visibility. Instead of stabilizing, his insecurity grows. He wants more acknowledgement, more credit. In hierarchy, craving recognition is weakness. Quiet earners last longer. Then comes the deeper flaw: addiction. Heroin doesn't create his instability, it exposes it. The pressure of living up to his father's myth and Tony's expectations eats at him. Drugs numb the doubt, but in that structure, reliability is everything. A made man who disappears, nods off, or spirals publicly becomes a liability. And once the word liability enters your file, your ceiling lowers permanently. The intervention scene is humiliating, but more importantly, it's political. Christopher isn't just being helped, he's being evaluated. The crew sees him weak, emotional, out of control. Respect doesn't return easily after that. Even when he gets clean, the memory of instability lingers. In organized hierarchy, perception becomes reality. Once labeled fragile, every future mistake confirms the narrative. Sobriety briefly sharpens him. He becomes more observant, more self-aware, but that awareness creates distance. He starts noticing dysfunction, hypocrisy, cracks in leadership. In that life, clarity is dangerous. Independent thinking feels like drift. Tony senses the shift. Christopher is no longer blindly loyal. He's reflective. And reflective men inside rigid hierarchies are unpredictable. Unpredictable men make bosses nervous. His Hollywood ambition exposes another fracture. He wants legitimacy beyond the street. Writing, producing, creating something that lives outside the crew. That's not just a hobby, it's psychological escape. But power structures punish divided loyalty. When he channels real-life resentment into his film, it reads as coded rebellion. Tony sees it. Respect cools. Trust thins. Ambition outside the family becomes disloyalty. At this stage, Christopher is technically elevated, earning well, commanding younger guys, sitting at higher tables. But rank is not the same as influence. He never develops political patience. He reacts when slighted. He takes things personally. Leadership in that world requires emotional insulation. Christopher remains reactive, and reactive men can't run empires. They can only serve inside them. Tony once frames him as a potential successor, but that window quietly closes. Leadership demands one trait above all: stability under pressure. Christopher's history, drugs, emotional volatility, public embarrassments stacks against him. Each incident chips away at the long-term plan. Eventually, he's no longer seen as future boss. He becomes useful, but contained. That's the invisible demotion no one announces. Resentment begins to build quietly. He feels underappreciated. He compares himself to others who seem less capable but more trusted. Comparison is corrosive inside rigid hierarchies. Instead of tightening his discipline, he tightens his ego. That subtle shift changes how he moves. He becomes more isolated, less aligned. And in that world, isolation is the first step toward being expendable. The relapse is not just a personal failure, it's a structural breach. A made man using again becomes unpredictable leverage for law enforcement. Arrest him at the wrong time, apply pressure, and the hierarchy is exposed. Tony understands that risk instantly. Christopher may still be loved in moments, but love doesn't override security. In organized crime, risk is calculated coldly. By now, Christopher is a contradiction. Officially elevated, privately unstable. He has authority over younger associates, but he doesn't command full confidence from above. That's a dangerous middle tier. Too high to be ignored, too flawed to be promoted. Men in that position either evolve into disciplined earners or drift into permanent suspicion. Christopher drifts. The gap between him and Tony widens in tone, not title. Conversations feel colder. Praise becomes rare. Corrections become sharper. Christopher senses it, but instead of tightening his discipline, he internalizes it as rejection. That psychological shift matters. When a soldier starts measuring respect instead of earning it, his focus fractures. And fractured focus leads to careless decisions. Fatherhood briefly stabilizes him. A daughter changes his posture. For a moment, he sees consequence beyond himself. But responsibility in that life doesn't soften the structure. It complicates it. A man with something to lose is either stronger or more vulnerable. Christopher doesn't fully choose either path. He exists in tension, trying to balance family and hierarchy without mastering either. The final relapse isn't dramatic, it's predictable. Patterns return under stress. And when he gets behind the wheel high again, the hierarchy's unspoken math activates. Addiction plus responsibility equals exposure. Exposure equals leverage. Leverage equals threat. Tony doesn't see a nephew in that moment. He sees future headlines, subpoenas, flipped testimony. That's how bosses think when survival is on the line. The car crash isn't the cause of his death, it's the confirmation. Trapped in the wreckage, bleeding high, apologizing, Christopher reveals the full picture. Instability has returned. Tony scans the scene, the baby seat in the back, the drugs in his system, the years of warnings. This isn't rage, it's evaluation. And in that life, evaluation can turn lethal in seconds. In that moment, Tony makes a structural decision, not an emotional one. A boss cannot afford a lieutenant who might collapse under pressure again. Addiction creates leverage. Leverage creates vulnerability. Vulnerability threatens the entire operation. Christopher isn't killed for disloyalty. He's killed for risk. And in organized hierarchy, reducing risk is often more important than rewarding loyalty. Christopher dies not as a rival, not as a traitor, but as a compromised asset. That distinction matters. He never tried to overthrow leadership. He never openly rebelled. His flaw was instability. In systems built on secrecy and discipline, instability is contagious. Once a man becomes a variable instead of a constant, the hierarchy recalculates. And recalculations rarely favor the emotional. After his death, the structure doesn't wobble. There's no succession crisis, no scramble for power. That silence reveals his true position. For years, he believed he was being groomed for permanence. In reality, he was conditional. His influence was granted, not rooted. And when granted influence is withdrawn, the machine keeps running. That's the harsh arithmetic of rank. Looking back, Christopher's trajectory follows a clean structural arc. Legacy birthright, associate proving ground, made man protection, mid-tier authority, stalled promotion, controlled suspicion, elimination. Each phase offered opportunity for discipline. Each phase exposed impatience. He never lacked talent. He lacked restraint. And restraint, not aggression, is what sustains men long-term inside closed hierarchies. What led him into the life wasn't greed, it was identity. He didn't chase money first, he chased belonging. The family gave him structure, purpose, and inherited status. But belonging inside rigid systems requires emotional containment. Christopher wanted validation more than alignment. And when validation becomes the priority, alignment eventually fractures. At every rank, he faced the same test. Can you control yourself when no one is applauding you? As an associate, he rushed respect. As a made man, he rushed recognition. As a rising earner, he rushed acknowledgement. He mistook visibility for power. True power in that structure comes from quiet consistency. Christopher never fully learned that lesson. Tony's relationship with him complicates everything. He's mentor, uncle, evaluator, and executioner. That blend creates emotional confusion. Christopher wants approval like a son, but is judged like an employee. He never separates those roles cleanly. When correction comes, he feels betrayal instead of instruction. That emotional misread widens the gap between them over time. He also underestimates the importance of optics. Every relapse, every outburst, every emotional confrontation leaves a mark. In hierarchical systems, memory is long. Leaders catalog patterns. Even when he improves, his history shadows him. Promotions aren't blocked by one mistake. They're blocked by accumulated doubt. Christopher's file grew thicker with each instability. By the end, he isn't feared by enemies or fully trusted by allies. That's the most dangerous place to stand. A man must be one or the other to survive long-term in that world. Christopher becomes neither. He's respected enough to matter, unstable enough to worry leadership. And when a boss starts worrying about you more than relying on you, the clock starts quietly ticking. His death is not cinematic glory. It's suffocation in the dark after a crash he caused himself. No speech, no ceremony, no warning. Just a hand over his nose and mouth and the realization that his protector has recalculated his value. In that moment, the myth he inherited collapses. Legacy doesn't save him. Rank doesn't save him. Only stability could have. What makes his ending powerful is how preventable it feels. He had access, he had mentorship, he had multiple second chances. Many associates never reach his level. But advancement without emotional discipline is fragile. Every opportunity he received required one thing in return: control. And control was the one trait he could never sustain consistently. Christopher believed loyalty would protect him. He was loyal in action, he killed when told, earned when told, stood by leadership publicly. But loyalty in that world is conditional. It lasts only as long as your presence strengthens the structure. Once your presence introduces instability, loyalty becomes irrelevant. That's the rule he never fully understood. He also misunderstood succession. Being called the future is not the same as being prepared for it. Succession requires political insulation, long-term patience, and the ability to absorb humiliation without reaction. Christopher reacted to everything. That reaction cost him subtle trust. And succession, in closed systems, is built on trust more than talent. His insecurity never left him. Even at higher rank, he still sought reassurance, still measured tone, still interpreted silence as disrespect. That internal noise drove decisions more than strategy did. And internal noise is fatal in environments that reward composure. The men who survive longest are often the least expressive. Christopher felt everything and showed it. The tragedy isn't that he was weak. It's that he was inconsistent. At times he showed sharp instincts, courage, even strategic thinking. But consistency builds legacy. Inconsistency builds suspicion. The organization didn't eliminate him for one failure. It eliminated him after a pattern. Patterns are what bosses study. And once a negative pattern solidifies, reversal becomes unlikely. When Tony looks at him in that crashed car, he isn't remembering the boy. He's reviewing the file. Addiction, relapses, emotional volatility, creative rebellion, growing distance. The boss sees trajectory, not sentiment. Christopher's trajectory points toward future exposure. And in systems built on secrecy, potential exposure is treated as active threat. In another life, Christopher might have redirected his ambition. He had creative drive, emotional depth, hunger for identity beyond the street. But he never detached from the myth he inherited. He tried to be both artist and enforcer, both son and soldier. That duality created tension he couldn't reconcile. And unresolved tension leaks into decision-making. His ranks tell the full story: associate seeking validation, made man seeking recognition, mid-tier authority seeking promotion. He climbed every formal step available to him, but the internal climb toward discipline and composure lagged behind. Hierarchies, external promotion without internal growth creates instability, And instability at higher rank is far more dangerous than at lower levels. When he gasps in that wrecked car, apologizing, promising it won't happen again, it mirrors his entire arc. Another second chance, another reset, but resets lose credibility when repeated. Tony understands something Christopher doesn't. Organizations survive by removing uncertainty. In that moment, Christopher isn't family. He's an unresolved variable. Christopher Moltisanti's journey ends the way it began, under someone else's hand. First shaped by his father's legend, then guided by Tony's authority, finally ended by Tony's calculation. He rose through every formal rank available to him, but never mastered the informal one that mattered most, self-command. And in that life, a man who cannot command himself will eventually be commanded, permanently. Christopher Moltisanti didn't fail because he lacked opportunity. He failed because he never mastered himself. Legacy gave him access, rank gave him protection, but instability erased both. If this breakdown helped you see the structure behind the story, like the video, subscribe, and comment the next character you want analyzed. This is the climb, and not everyone who rises is built to stay there.